Hello and welcome. I'm Ramesh Ramachandran and you're watching Newsnight on DD News and DD India, your primetime destination for news and bespoke analysis. It's good to have you again with us. On the show tonight, we get you a deep dive into the COVID-19 situation obtaining in India. Also on the show tonight, we get you a ground report from Ayodhya, plus news and updates from around the world. But first, as always, the headlines. Rajasthan politics hots up. Rounds of meetings in the KELO camp continue. Cabinet decides to urge governor to convene the assembly, says it will approach the president if deadlock persists. The BJP says the chief minister's threat of holding a sit-in outside the Raj Bhavan is a violation of the law. Uttar Pradesh Chief Minister Yogi Adityanath visits Ayodhya, reviews preparations for the 5th August groundbreaking ceremony of the Ram temple there. Says will make Ayodhya the pride of India and the world. Prime Minister Narendra Modi reviews the PMSwerniti scheme, says it should incentivize the use of end-to-end digital transactions by street vendors. India achieves a record number of 4.2 lakh COVID-19 tests in a single day. Fatality rate drops further to 2.35%. The union government advises states to aggressively conduct tests for combating the pandemic. Madhya Pradesh Chief Minister Shivraj Singh Chauhan tests positive for COVID-19. He has been admitted to a designated COVID-19 hospital in Bhopal and his condition is said to be normal. Nearly 1.6 crore coronavirus cases globally, active cases at nearly 55 lakh. The death toll crosses 6.4 lakh. The US is the worst affected with more than 42 lakh cases. Flood situation in Assam improves marginally. No death reported in the last 24 hours. In Bihar, around 10 lakh people affected from flood in 10 districts. Relief operations are underway. And Haryana to host the 4th edition of KELO India Youth Games. Sports Minister Kiren Rijiju says Panchkula to host the games. All right, let's dive straight into our cover story. India has set a new national record for the number of COVID-19 tests in a single day. What's more, the fatality rate has fallen further to 2.35%, which is among the lowest in the world. More in the next report. India's fight against COVID-19 is delivering results. The strategy of test, track and treat has succeeded in containing the spread of the coronavirus. For the first time in India, more than 4.2 lakh COVID-19 tests were conducted in a single day. Last week, on an average, 3.5 lakh tests were done per day. The tests per million has increased to 11,485.
Trace, track, test, treat and teamwork. These are the basics of epidemiology for containment of any infective disease. So if we detect the cases early by increasing our testing capacity, we will be able to diagnose the cases early and thereby these patients can be taken care of early, treated early and they can be kept in isolation to stop the spread of disease further.
India's recovery rate has shown further improvement. 32,223 people recovered in the last 24 hours. A total of 8,49,431 people have recovered so far. The recovery rate has improved to 63.54%. The difference in the number of active cases and number of people who have recovered has increased to 3,93,360. The number of active cases in India is 4,56,071. The fatality rate is 2.35%, which is among the lowest in the world.
हम मृत्यु को देखें पर मिलियन पॉपुलेशन के हिसाब से तो ये 20.4 है भारत में. ये भी विश्व में सबसे कम मृत्यु दरों में से है.
One reason for this achievement is the increase in the number of laboratories from merely 1 in January 2020 to 1,301 on 25th July. It includes 902 government labs and 399 private labs. 9 states have reported a spike in the number of coronavirus cases. The 9 states are Telangana, Andhra Pradesh, Karnataka, Uttar Pradesh, Bihar, Jharkhand, Odisha, West Bengal and Assam. The union government has advised states and union territories to keep up the strategy of test, track and treat with aggressive testing. Initially, it may lead to a higher number of daily positive cases, but it would eventually decline, as has been demonstrated in Delhi. Bureau Report, DD India. Alright, so we're discussing about COVID-19 situation in India. So let me delve a bit more into the details just for you, the viewers out there. Let's first bring up the tests per million data for Indian nationals as on 24th July 2020. Now, this gives you the number of tests per million population. That's 10 lakh people in India. Now, let's start with the 1st July there. 1st July, the number was just a shade more than 6,000, which has steadily increased over the last 24 days. On the 24th July, the number was 11,180. So, a steady increase in the number of tests per million Indians as on 24th July 2020. Let's bring up the second graphic, and that gives you a sense of the number of laboratories in India today as we speak. Remember, on 1st July again, the number of laboratories in India was just a shade over 1,000, which has increased again in the last 24 days. And on 24th July, the number was 1,290. Now, this includes both government and private labs, about 800 government labs and 300 plus private labs. So, the steady increase in number of laboratories in India as on 24th July 2020. Let's pull up the third graphic just for you. Now, this talks about India setting a new national record. What is that record? More than 4.2 lakh tests in one single day. Now, in the last 1 week, we've seen 3.5 lakh tests per day over a period of a week or so. And India's strategy is the 3T strategy: test, track and treat, which has proved effective. But more tests could mean more positive cases, but it will decline, as has been demonstrated in New Delhi. And finally, the recovery rate has improved further to 63.54%. Right, moving on to the next graphic we have for you. Let's talk about the Department of Biotechnology of the Government of India. Now, the Department of Biotechnology is leading the National Biopharma Mission. What is the mission about? It is a joint effort between the industry and academia, and $250 million have been earmarked by the government for the National Biopharma Mission, of which 50% will be co-funded by the World Bank. Now, there's one company based out of Pune that's called MyLab Discovery Solutions, and that has scaled up its operation in the last few weeks. Why? Because the company is now producing and developing more COVID-19 testing kits, also known as PathoDetect testing kits. It's received a strategic funding under the National Biopharma Mission. So that's the COVID-19 data as on date from across the country. All right, time for a very short break here on Newsnight. But news continues here after the break, and our guests come back for discussion in our In Focus segment. Don't go anywhere. Keep watching Newsnight.
इनमें से एक है आपका डिटर्जेंट और एक फेना, तो कौन सा बेहतर है? ये है ज्यादा सफेद फेना।
100 में से 70 लोगों ने फेना सुपर वॉश को अपने डिटर्जेंट से बेहतर पाया है।
अब आप आप ही लीजिए फेना सफेदी चैलेंज और खुद कहना फेना ही लेना।
फेना कपड़ों से हटाए कीटाणु, इंडिया में बना गर्व के साथ।
क्यों बहनों, मिल गई ना खबर कैंप की? हाँ
आशा, तू तो वहाँ मेरी नजर का इलाज करवा।
नजर ही नहीं चाची, नाक, कान, त्वचा, शुगर, बीपी या कोई यौन रोग हो, सेहत और इलाज की मुफ्त सुविधा अब हमारे घर पर ही आ गई है।
कैंप की अधिक जानकारी शहरी स्वास्थ्य केंद्र से या अपनी बस्ती की आशा से प्राप्त कीजिए।
स्वस्थ बने जीवन, हर बस्ती हर आंगन।
राष्ट्रीय शहरी स्वास्थ्य मिशन हरियाणा।
बरसात में कई स्थानों पर लैंडस्लाइड के कारण जान माल का काफी नुकसान हुआ है।
बरसात के मौसम में लैंडस्लाइड जरूर होता है क्या?
पहाड़ों पर मिट्टी की मजबूत पकड़ नहीं होने से ही ना बारिश में लैंडस्लाइड का खतरा बढ़ता है।
तो इसमें गलती किसकी है काका?
हमारी।
हमारी गलती कैसे?
जैसे पेड़ ना लगाना और पेड़ों की कटाई, गलत खेती करना, लापरवाही से कूड़ा करकट फेंक देना जिससे पानी की निकासी का रुक जाना, ऐसी गलतियाँ कभी नहीं करो
और लैंडस्लाइड से बचो।
बिल्कुल।
आपके हित में तत्पर एनडीए में।
Right, welcome back. You're watching News Night on DD News and DD India. Time now for our In Focus segment in which we're discussing about India and COVID-19, more labs, more tests and fewer deaths. All right, joining me are Dr. Raman Ganga Khedkar, former head of epidemiology at the Indian Council of Medical Research or ICMR, and Dr. M.C. Mishra, a senior surgeon and former director of the All India Institute of Medical Sciences in New Delhi. Gentlemen, welcome to News Night. If I can start with you, Dr. Ganga Khedkar. Now, we are 7 months into the outbreak of the coronavirus pandemic in India and around the world. As the former chief epidemiologist at ICMR, your thoughts on the way India has progressed in breaking the chain and combating the coronavirus in the last 6 odd months?
One of the things, if we recall, your earlier statements, you said the first thing that you have to do for breaking the chain is to test more.
Right.
You have to ensure that you trace more and then you treat more and you isolate those who are infected.
Right.
Now, we started this particular mission to enhance the access to testing by creating more labs. If you could imagine, to begin with, in the month of January, we had only one lab, that is right. ICMR, National Institute of Virology in Pune. Now we have grown this network so big that we are able to even test 4 lakh odd tests that we have done today. And that's not a small thing that has to happen. Second thing which we have to realize is one of the issues that we could have had faced was how do we teach all 135 crore population about these personal protective measures that they are expected to take, given the fact that if we were to teach everybody, it would have been far more difficult. Right. But lockdown as a measure suddenly also improved the ability of all these individuals to understand why is this being done, how it has to be done, why precautions have to be followed well, and they were rigorously followed. And you are able to see now that the peak that people used to talk about is still far away. What you are currently seeing is the outbreak has been delayed to such a large extent that we got a sufficient time to ensure that the hospitals gear up to provide quality care. They have all kinds of equipment which are required to do that. People who are going to treat these patients are also trained on these issues related to use of these equipment and provision of quality care. All this was possible mainly because of the comprehensive steps that Government of India took up in the initial period of this COVID-19 outbreak. Over.
Right. Dr. Mishra, as we said in that report there, the number of tests has consistently increased in the last several months. Now, the tests per million population has also increased, which means that the number of laboratories also increased, correspondingly over the last several weeks. So, in your estimation, is the 3T strategy, test, track and treat, is that proving effective in the near term and the long term as well?
Absolutely, as Dr. Ganga Khedkar mentioned, that in March we had very limited capacity for testing.
Right.
We were not really prepared to track. Actually, tracking has been a little bit an issue in India.
Okay.
If we had done that in the beginning for those who were arriving from overseas, I think that is where we were off track. Because if we had done that rigorously, as we are doing today, that everybody who is coming from overseas is being quarantined for 2 weeks, strictly for at least 1 week, and if he or she remains asymptomatic, then home quarantine. But if you would remember, Rameshji, that people were stamped on their dorsum of their hand and they were let go. So I think that is where we had little bit of laxity on the airports. If we had strictly done that, then again there was no treatment whatsoever in March, except that when Mr. Trump mentioned about hydroxychloroquine, then it came into focus, and then India exported this drug to many countries, including USA. And also there were ICMR guidelines where Dr. Ganga Khetkar was also part of those guidelines that for healthcare workers, the hydroxychloroquine was recommended. Since then came in April the plasma therapy, and now actually we have number of drugs which have been approved by DCGI for treatment of antiviral drugs, oral drugs as well as injectable drugs, remdesivir and favipiravir, and then dexamethasone study came about, although people were still using that drug. And then for those who were developing cytokine storm in critical care units, this tocilizumab also came very handy, and it saved many lives. And so if you look at one of the hospitals, AIMS hospital in Jhajjar, where almost 1,000 patients were analyzed, and in that actually majority of the patients, they recovered without any problem. Out of those 950 patients, 100 required only oxygen and they recovered and went home, and only 3 patients required ventilatory support and they succumbed to the COVID infection. Of course, we have lost 30,000 plus people in India. This is not a small number. We feel satisfied that it's compared to rest of the world, the mortality is quite low, and at the end of the pandemic, this mortality is going to remain very low, maybe less than 0.5% also at the end of the pandemic. Now we know what is to be done. That happy hypoxia concept came about, that people who are having hypoxia and succumbing to that immediately, they were not diagnosed. Right. So now, like I also have a pulse oximeter at home. So many people are keeping that small gadget at home. And also then we realized that ventilator is not the answer in critical care units. We saw mortality in UK, USA and other countries. They saw mortality was higher when people were put on ventilator. Now what the critical care specialists are talking about, awake proning of these patients with oxygen, high flow oxygen, awake proning, and it is saving a lot of lives. So I would say that like in March, if you remember, we were all saying no need to put on mask by healthy people if they are not symptomatic. Only the symptomatic ones should put on the mask. But we have come 360 degree around now. Right. The mask is proving to be the main focus of our prevention, and so physical distancing or social distancing, whatever we may call. So, but I must tell you that if you travel around the city, whether in Delhi, whether in Jaipur or whether in other places, people are still very lax about these measures, simple measures, which are not costing. People are not taking precautions. If you remember, there was a marriage in Bihar where 350 people gathered and 110 were found positive out of those people. We saw Bhilwara incident, we saw Indore, we saw Jamaat fiasco, we saw exodus of labor, and all that is now showing up in this increased number of patients. In Delhi, we saw zero prevalence, 25% population which was screened, 21,387 individuals, zero prevalence. This IgG antibody was positive in 25%, almost 1/4. So there has been these issues, and these people, they were not symptomatic, they all recovered. but they must have infected at least 2 to 4 people themselves. So that is where this testing becomes very, very important. And now, naturally in Delhi, the antigen testing also has been added, which we were asking from the very beginning to add that, because it takes away the load of RT-PCR, number one. Number two, if you look at its false negativity, then it is not worse than RT-PCR. RT-PCR can miss out cases. We have known patients, we had one of the doctors in Delhi itself had 3 RT-PCRs negative, and he had the disease and he succumbed to the disease. So we have had these problems also with RT-PCR, because there are a lot of if and buts and gap when you collect the sample, how much you have with accuracy, how much virus has come on that sample, and whether the test was done the same day or the next day or the next day. So in the beginning, these were the issues which have been sorted out in Delhi. Now we are happy that Delhi is having the largest number of per million tests, like 40,000 tests per million. Chennai is next, then Maharashtra and other states. So I would say the testing needs to further go up. Now we have 1,300 labs. Maybe we can have more labs, or these labs can use to their full capacity, because many labs, like in between we heard Dr. Balram Bhargav saying the capacity is not being used. So we must use the capacity to the fullest. Also, pool testing in certain areas might be an answer to that.
Fair point, yeah. And
I think testing, tracking, treatment, and we must identify those who are going to become more sick. Their requirement for oxygen, as well as we have to intervene early with remdesivir. Also, it's an expensive drug, actually. So if we have to intervene, we have to intervene early to save lives. So now, actually, the mortality will further go down with treatment also. Like we saw how much 80%, 90% mortality in critical care
Dr.
unit.
Mishra, hold your thoughts. We'll come to that in just a bit. But if I can just inform our viewers about Dr. Ganga Khirkar. He holds the Dr. C.G. Pandit National Chair at the ICMR today. Dr. Ganga Khirkar, coming to you now. Dr. Mishra said about the testing. He had some very valid points there and suggestions as well. Now, when we say that the tests per million have gone up also because of the number of laboratories available for those tests, the downside could be that there will be a larger percentage of positive cases being reported going forward. But we are told that it will eventually decline, as has been demonstrated in Delhi. Help our viewers understand what this means. Does it mean, for instance, that the impact of the coronavirus will be felt for a longer duration going forward instead of seeing a sharp fall?
Yeah, there is a small concept which I would try to explain.
Right.
You know, we have to remember that if there is a village where you have, let's say, 10 people who are infected, and when you saturate that village with testing, these 10 people who could potentially infect others, you might find 5 out of them were coming in the first few days of offer of test. But as the proportion tends to increase, you will find the reservoir will have less number of active cases remaining in that village. And naturally, what will happen? No, if I am testing, you might find that in that small village, you will say that the number of people who are being found positive has suddenly jumped up. But then what are you doing? You are flushing out those who are potentially infective individuals, and then you are trying to manage them appropriately, whether you have to isolate them, whether you have to treat them, and try to ensure that the reservoir becomes small and smaller. And therefore, it is important to saturate the population with tests, and once you saturate them, you will find that the active cases go down and the number of infections, new infections that can occur will also go down over a period of time. The quicker you do it, the better will be the yield. Like you have seen in Delhi, in a short period of time, it was saturated with all kinds of tests, whether it was RT-PCR, whether it was rapid antigen test. The numbers that were tested, the tests that were offered also in terms of numbers was so high that you found that suddenly the new cases that you are detecting now have declined sharply. So essentially the strategy has to be to enhance access to testing. But it can't only be enhancement of testing sites, but people have to come forward by themselves, and say that I want to take the test because I have certain symptoms which I feel are associated with COVID-19. They should not feel stigmatized and remain hidden in the household. If they do it, they will definitely are more likely to spread this infection within the family. Therefore, you need both. The demand and supply side has to be met appropriately, and if we do that together, the government as well as the people, if they work together on this particular issue, decline will always be seen quickly.
Gentlemen, I'm afraid I'm running out of time, so may I thank you once again, Dr. Ganga Kherkar and Dr. Mishra, for joining us on NewsNet. Appreciate it. Thank you again for your time. Right, moving on, now take a look at all the COVID-19 updates from India.
Madhya Pradesh Chief Minister Shivraj Singh Chauhan has tested positive for the novel coronavirus. News of Shivraj Singh Chauhan testing positive comes 2 days after a meeting in his cabinet. Arvind Singh Bhadoria said he was infected. Meanwhile, the Chief Minister reassured supporters that there was no need to panic, and despite his medical condition, he would continue to lead efforts to contain the virus in his state. A 7-day total lockdown from July 25th to 31st has been announced in Nagaland's capital city of Kohima, and an 8-day partial lockdown from July 26th to August 2nd in Dimapur district, which is the state's commercial hub. Nagaland government has exempted the Department of Animal Husbandry and Veterinary Services and staff of Guwahati High Court, Kohima bench from total lockdown. Janata curfew will be imposed in Nagpur district of Maharashtra in wake of the rising number of coronavirus cases. The curfew will be imposed for 2 days, Saturday and Sunday. Amid the 55 hours lockdown in Uttar Pradesh, people were seen following the guidelines issued by the government in Varanasi. During this, essential and emergency services, including health-related services, continued. People celebrated the festival of Nag Panchami inside their homes. In Kerala, state government has announced that there will not be another complete lockdown in the state. The Chief Minister met the opposition party leaders to discuss the COVID-19 situation in the state. Government also imposed a curfew in Ernakulam's Aluva region. The Chief Minister said an action plan has been devised to tackle super spread of the virus by adopting a cluster-based approach. Triple lockdown will continue till July 28th. A strict lockdown in the Kashmir Valley entered the 3rd day due to worsening COVID-19 situation. Authorities imposed strict restrictions in Kashmir for 6 days. No movement of people except medical emergencies and essential services was allowed, with most of the roads barricaded by the police in Srinagar city. A comprehensive town-wide lockdown will be imposed in Kalimpong municipality for 7 days, starting 9 a.m. Sunday to curb the spread of COVID-19. All officials, private and government, except those providing essential services, health services, law and order, disaster management, electricity, will remain shut. The Rajasthan government is now planning to start the state's first plasma bank in Jaipur for those infected in the high contagious coronavirus disease. State Health Minister Raghu Sharma said that the bank will be set up at Savai Man Singh Hospital in the city. In a unique effort, researchers at IIT Kharagpur have innovated a novel portable rapid diagnostic device to detect COVID-19 infection. It can test samples of COVID-19 infection within an hour for ₹400 only. The new device has been designated to be usable at remote locations with extremely poor resources with solar power and battery. Moreover, it can be operated by people who have almost no training.
And there is no end to political drama in Rajasthan. Hectic political activity in Jaipur. This even as the matter is pending before the Rajasthan High Court. Here's a report.
The political upheaval in Rajasthan continues. The state's political battle is caught between the Raj Bhavan and Speaker of the Legislative Assembly, the Rajasthan High Court and the Supreme Court. Chief Minister Ashok Gehlot was scheduled to meet the governor and submit a cabinet note seeking the convening of the assembly session at the earliest. The cabinet also took another decision to approach the president if the deadlock continued. Before the cabinet meeting, the Congress Legislative Party met at the Fairmont Hotel in Jaipur and expressed their complete support to the Ashok Gehlot. Talking of the BJP, Union Minister Gajendra Singh Shekhawat attacked Rajasthan Chief Minister Ashok Gehlot for staging a dharna at the Raj Bhavan. He said, in a state where the Chief Minister himself makes the governor feel unsafe, it is futile for people to plead to him for their safety. Accusing Governor Kalraj Mishra of acting under pressure to not call an assembly session, Gehlot, along with several Congress MLAs, had staged a sit-in at the Raj Bhavan in Jaipur on Friday. Meanwhile, a delegation of the opposition BJP also met Rajasthan Governor Kalraj Mishra. They discussed the situation arising due to the spread of coronavirus. BJP State President Satish Punia and leader of opposition Gulab Chand Kataria led a 13-member delegation. They accused the Gehlot government of violating orders under the State Disaster Management Act that ban large gatherings due to COVID-19 pandemic.
कल जो राजस्थान की जनता ने दृश्य देखा कि किस तरीके से राजस्थान के मुख्यमंत्री जो गृह मंत्री भी हैं राजभवन को राज्यपाल को खुली चुनौती देते हैं यदि हमारे दबाव में आकर विधानसभा सत्र की आहूत करने की घोषणा नहीं करेंगे तो राजभवन को 8 करोड़ राजस्थान की जनता घेर लेगी सीधे सीधे आपराधिक कृत्य की श्रेणी में आता है किसी भी सूबे का मुख्यमंत्री ऐसी आपराधिक भाषा का इस्तेमाल कैसे कर सकता है
मुझे लगता है कि ये लोकतंत्र की बार बार दुहाई देने वाले अपने आप को गांधीवादी कहने वाले लोग व्यक्ति को इस बात के ऐसा कहना शोभा नहीं देता किसी भी संवैधानिक पद की अपनी मर्यादा है उस मर्यादा को बनाए रखते हुए आचरण करने की जिम्मेदारी हम सब की है
The Ashok Gehlot-led Congress government, which is facing a political crisis after rebellion by 19 dissident Congress MLAs, including rebel party leader Sachin Pilot, wants to hold the assembly session to prove the majority. A letter was forwarded by the Gehlot government to the governor on Thursday for calling the session. Later, a statement from the Raj Bhavan said the governor has sought a clarification on the 6 points. On Friday, Congress MLAs in the Ashok Gehlot camp ended a 5-hour dharna at Raj Bhavan after an assurance from the governor that he will go by the constitutional provisions on summoning an assembly session. The political drama unveiling in Rajasthan is already in court. On July 23rd, the Supreme Court said the outcome of the High Court's judgment would be subject to its final order on the matter. The Apex Court will hear the case next on July 27th. With Rajasthan Bureau, Newsnight Desk, DD India.
All right, shifting focus from Rajasthan now to Uttar Pradesh, where UP Chief Minister Yogi Adityanath on Saturday visited Ayodhya. He reviewed preparations for the 5th August groundbreaking ceremony of the Ram temple there. On the occasion, he said he wants to make Ayodhya the pride of India and the world. Here's a report.
The Uttar Pradesh government is making all efforts to make the groundbreaking ceremony on the 5th of August a big success. Chief Minister Yogi Adityanath on Saturday reached Ayodhya to review the preparations for the ceremonial beginning of the construction of the Grand Temple on the birthplace of Lord Ram. Yogi Adityanath directly visited Ram Janmabhoomi and paid his obeisance to Ram Lalla. Yogi Adityanath visited the premises of Ram Janmabhoomi and took stock of the preparations for Bhumi Pujan. The CM also visited Hanuman Garhi and offered prayers. He also made a stopover at the Ram Mandir construction workshop, where the carving of stones for the temple has been going on for years. Yogi Adityanath held a meeting with local representatives, Sadhu Sant and trust members in Kar Sevak Puram to make the event historic.
दीपोत्सव की प्रेरणा हमें मिल रही है कि नहीं अयोध्या में दीपोत्सव का कार्यक्रम होना है जिसके पीछे इसका मतलब ये राम काज ही है और उस काज के लिए हम लोगों को अयोध्या को दीपोत्सव के साथ जोड़ देना चाहिए देश और दुनिया में कितना व्यापक प्रभाव है अयोध्या का और ये करने में हम सफल रहे क्योंकि आदरणीय प्रधानमंत्री जी का मार्गदर्शन और अयोध्या के प्रति देश के प्रति भारतीयता के प्रति जो एक भाव उनके अंदर है आज उसका परिणाम है कि शुभ मुहूर्त हम सबके सामने आ रहा है
The chanting of Ram Naam and recitation of Ramcharitmanas will take place in every mutt and temple in Ayodhya from the 3rd of August to the 5th. A special Deepotsav will be organized on the night of the 4th and the 5th of August. The Sant community and dignitaries present in the meeting expressed their extreme happiness over the Bhumi Pujan program.
मुख्यमंत्री जी आज आए अयोध्या और राम जन्मभूमि जो बनने जा रहा है, जो 5 तारीख के पूजन के लिए आ रहे हैं, विशेष करके उसके लिए आए हैं कि भव्य से भव्य मंदिर का निर्माण हो और हर मंदिर में दीपावली जैसा कार्यक्रम हो।
5 अगस्त हम सब लोगों के लिए यादगार बनना चाहिए। सारे मंदिरों को सजाया जाए, मिठाई बांटा जाए, दीप जलाया जाए। अयोध्या वासियों ने भगवान श्री राम का राज्याभिषेक किया था, उसी प्रकार से इस समय में भी अयोध्या जी को सजाया संवारा जाएगा।
यहाँ पर दीपोत्सव मनाया जाए, स्वच्छता का ख्याल रखा जाए और साथ में 3 तारीख से ही रामायण का पाठ प्रारंभ किया जाए घर घर में।
After the groundbreaking ceremony, it is expected that construction of the temple will take at least 3 years. With inputs from Ashwini Mishra in Ayodhya, News Night Desk, DD India.
And Prime Minister Modi on Saturday reviewed the implementation of the PMSwerniti scheme of the Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs. Now, more than 64,000 out of a total of 2.6 lakh applications have been sanctioned and over 5,500 disbursed. The Prime Minister expressed satisfaction at the use of end-to-end IT solutions through a web portal and mobile app for administration of the scheme to ensure transparency, accountability and speed. The Prime Minister said the scheme should incentivize the use of end-to-end digital transactions by street vendors. He said the scheme should not just be seen from the perspective of extending loans to street vendors, but also for their economic uplift and holistic development. The government launched the scheme to facilitate collateral-free working capital of up to 10,000 rupees of 1-year tenure to about 50 lakh street vendors to help them restart their businesses. Now, in response to a tweet by Congress's Rahul Gandhi, Gujarat Chief Minister Vijay Rupani replied that, and this is what he has said, copying Gujarat's initiatives and selling them as your ideas does not show your smartness. I don't expect you to know details of anything, but your script writers should know better. How about a one defeat, one reinvention policy for you? That's the Gujarat Chief Minister. Now, the tweet came after Rahul Gandhi shared a news report on Twitter regarding the Industries Department conducting a baseline survey in all districts of Himachal Pradesh to select one district, one product for the centrally sponsored Micro and Small Enterprises Cluster Development Program. Now, Gandhi in his tweet said that this is a good idea. I had suggested it some time back. Its implementation will need a complete change of mindset. And the Gujarat Chief Minister has replied in response to that tweet by Rahul Gandhi. Also, former Gujarat Chief Minister Anandiben Patel has also put out a tweet talking about the concept of one village, one product, thus citing that the concept had already been suggested much earlier in Gujarat. Right, moving on, now the UP Chief Minister Yogi Adityanath also took a jibe at Rahul Gandhi as he asked in a tweet, when will Gandhi get rid of his childish antics? UP Chief Minister said our government gave the mantra of one district, one product and pledged to give it a concrete shape at the ground level. And today, during the COVID-19 crisis, this scheme is proving to be the greatest boon at the grassroots level. We fulfilled what we promised. Perhaps Mr. Gandhi has forgot. In the 2017 Assembly Elections Manifesto for UP, we promised promoting local produce in every district. And today, this scheme is proving to be a boon for small industries and local workers, unquote. Right, moving on, the flood situation in Assam has improved marginally as incessant rain has stopped in some areas of the state. No deaths were reported in the last 24 hours. 16 NDRF teams have been deployed in 13 districts. However, the Brahmaputra, Dhansiri, Jia Bharali, Kopili and Beki rivers were flowing above the danger mark in some districts. Out of the 33 districts of Assam, 26 remain affected by floodwaters. The floods have affected 27 lakh people. Dhubri, Golpara and Barpeta among the worst affected. More than 1.19 lakh hectares of agricultural land are submerged. Meanwhile, in Bihar, 21 teams of the NDRF are currently deployed in the state. More teams have been kept on standby. 3 teams each are working in the districts of Saran, Gopalganj and East Champaran. 1 team each in the districts of Katihar, Kishanganj, Araria, Madhubani, Muzaffarpur and Patna is helping the local authorities in relief and rescue operations. About 10 lakh people are reeling under the impact of the floods. Now take a look at what else is making news in India in our national wrap.
In Jammu and Kashmir, 2 terrorists were killed in an encounter that broke out in Ranbirgarh near Banzinara area in the outskirts of Srinagar city. According to a police joint team of Army, CRPF and police laid a cordon and search operation in the area based on an intelligence input. As the team approached towards the suspected spot, the terrorists fired upon them. The security forces retaliated, resulting in the killing of 2 terrorists. Weapons were also recovered from the slain terrorists. Western Army Commander Lieutenant General R.P. Singh along with Lieutenant General Bhupendra Dwivedi, GOC, Rising Star Corps visited Kasoli, Bahulok and Mamur military station to review the current security situation and operational readiness. We reviewed the operational preparedness in the forward areas and interacted with the field formation commanders. Lieutenant General R.P. Singh boosted the morale of the troops on ground and expressed confidence about the preparedness of the Rising Star Corps to thwart any type of threat posed by our adversaries and anti-national elements. He exhorted all ranks to continue working with same zeal and enthusiasm. A 8-year-old who was kidnapped from eastern Uttar Pradesh, Gonda district on Friday was rescued after a joint operation of the Special Task Force and local police personnel in the wee hours of Saturday. 5 persons, including a couple, have been arrested following an encounter between the kidnappers and the STF and police team. Ahead of the Raksha Bandhan festival, Traders Body Confederation of All India Traders (CAIT) has issued an appeal to boycott Chinese Rakhi. The traders body has resolved for a purely Hindustani Rakhi festival. The traders group handed over 10,400 Rakhis to Raksha Mantri Rajnath Singh to be further sent to soldiers guarding the country's borders. BJP National President JP Nadda on Saturday held a virtual meeting with the party's Jammu and Kashmir office bearers. The BJP president also laid homage to the party's workers and armed personnel who laid down their lives in service of the motherland. A CRPF sub-inspector killed his senior and then committed suicide in Delhi's Lodi estate area late on Friday night. Preliminary investigation has revealed that the 2 CRPF personnel shared the same room as their office space in the safe house. Further investigation is underway. The month of Sawan or Shravan is filled with festivities. Nag Panchami is celebrated on the 5th day of Shukla Paksha in the month of Sawan. People offer milk, flowers, fruits to the snake idol of health, wealth and prosperity of their family members. For the first time, devotees offered prayers and took darshans at Ujjain's Nag Chandreshwar temple online on the occasion of Nag Panchami. The priest had arranged the facility of online darshans in view of COVID-19 pandemic.
All right, to international news now. United Nations report says at least 6,000 Pakistani terrorists operate in Afghanistan. Now, most of the terrorists are with the Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan terror group. The document is called the 26th report of the Analytical Support and Sanctions Monitoring Team concerning the Islamic State, Al-Qaeda and associated individuals and entities. It says the Al-Qaeda in the Indian subcontinent operates under the umbrella of the Taliban from the Nimruz, Helmand and Kandahar provinces of Afghanistan. The AQIS has up to 200 members from Pakistan and some other countries. Some former TTP militants have joined the Islamic State Khorasan. The UN report says that the Al-Qaeda is covertly active in 12 Afghan provinces and that its leader Ayman al-Zawahiri is in Afghanistan. The report estimates the total number of Al-Qaeda fighters in Afghanistan to be between 400 and 600. The report also says that Al-Qaeda leadership maintains a close contact with the Haqqani network. Meanwhile, China has urged the U.S. to immediately withdraw its decision on closing China's consulate in Houston. Otherwise, China will make legitimate and necessary reactions. China's Consulate General in New York said on Saturday in a statement that the U.S. abruptly demanded that China's consulate in Houston cease all operations and events on the 21st of July. Now, China's Foreign Ministry spokesperson termed it a political provocation unilaterally launched by the U.S. side, which seriously violates international law. In Russia, thousands of people marched in far eastern city of Khabarovsk on Saturday for the third weekend in a row, protesting at President Vladimir Putin's handling of a regional political crisis that has sparked demonstrations. The residents of Khabarovsk are unhappy about the 9th July detention of the wider region's popular regional governor, Sergei Furgal, who was arrested on murder charges, which he denies. Federal agents fired tear gas canisters at Black Lives Matter demonstrators in downtown Portland early Saturday in a 57th straight day of protests amid growing scrutiny over the use of Border Patrol officers in the city. Security forces have frequently tear-gassed and clubbed demonstrators during the unrest. The U.S. Justice Department said it will investigate the use of force by federal agents in Portland. The investigations follow public anger of the deployment of federal Border Patrol officers to Portland against the wishes of local officials. Meanwhile, U.S. President Donald Trump's administration has said it is sending a similar contingent to Seattle. Demonstrators and local officials see the deployment of the agents in Portland as a ploy by Trump to drum up a law and order campaign as he faces an uphill re-election battle. The mayor, Wheeler, who's a Democrat, has called the intervention an abuse of federal power and said it was escalating this violence. All right, time now for all the world news related to COVID-19. We start with France. Some countries in the European Union have reinforced prevention measures against the coronavirus, such as enhanced sanitary security at the borders due to the high risk of epidemic resurgence in recent days. The French Health Ministry said 11 new clusters of infection were identified. From 1st August, France will impose COVID-19 tests on travelers arriving from 16 red zone countries where the virus circulates rapidly. Hospitals in 2 cities in Peru are struggling to cope with a wave of coronavirus infections. Their stretched resources are buckling under the pressure of increasing number of patients. A city in southern Peru has become the new epicenter of COVID-19 pandemic, where more than 10,000 cases of the novel coronavirus have been reported in recent days. As restrictions in Peru's capital Lima ease up, the virus is now ravaging other areas. Meanwhile, outside the capital, health workers say they lack resources to tackle the increasing number of infections. Thousands of Filipinos were crammed into a baseball stadium in Manila on Saturday after people wanting to return to their home provinces flooded a government transportation program. They broke social distancing rules despite the coronavirus risks. Officials had reserved the stadium as a place to test people before transporting them back to their home provinces. The program aims to help people who had lost their jobs in the capital return to their families elsewhere. Officials had planned for 7,500 people to arrive at the stadium from Friday, but were caught out when another 2,000 people who were not yet scheduled to travel headed there anyways. South Korea reported 113 cases of the virus on Saturday. It was the largest one-day increase since March. It brought the country's total to 14,092. Of the new cases, 86 were imported and 27 were domestic infections. Now, Saturday's infections were the highest since 31st March, when 125 people were reported with the coronavirus. A U.S. official says children should return to school even if it turns out that they are transmitting the coronavirus that's claimed more than 1.4 lakh lives in the country. White House Press Secretary Kayleigh McEnany said President Trump was pushing to reopen schools, which abruptly shuttered when the coronavirus first began spreading across the country. This despite teachers and families' concerns that children could contract or transmit the disease should they return to classrooms. Right, moving on, Haryana Chief Minister Manohar Lal Khattar and Minister of Sports and Youth Affairs Kiren Rijiju on Saturday announced that Panchkula will host the 4th edition of the KELO India Youth Games next year. The announcement was made via a video conference. The decision was taken after Haryana Sports Minister Sandeep Singh urged the Sports Minister to give Haryana the KELO India platform. Haryana finished first in the 2018 Youth Games. In the last edition of the Games in Guwahati, Haryana was placed second with 200 medals to its name. The dates have still not been finalized, but the minister indicated that the 2021 KELO India Youth Games will be held after the Tokyo Olympic Games. The Olympics will be held between 23rd July and 8th August next year.
अगले साल जो ओलंपिक्स है टोक्यो वो एक साल पोस्टपोन हो गया तो अगले साल होने वाला है तो उस ओलंपिक्स के बाद मैं माननीय मुख्यमंत्री जी से और हमारे खेल मंत्री संदीप जी से बात करके उसका जो डेट है कौन सा तारीख से कब तक ये महाकुंभ खेलो इंडिया गेम्स हरियाणा में होगा इसका डेट का घोषणा बाद में हम चर्चा करके इसको करेंगे। जैसे ओलंपिक्स खत्म हो जाएंगे टोक्यो ओलंपिक्स उसके बाद हम तुरंत खेलो इंडिया गेम्स पंचकुला हरियाणा 2021 का हम तैयारी करेंगे।
And now to a special report. On the eve of the 21st anniversary of the Kargil Victory Day, we take you to Kaskar village, which has a special connection with the Kargil war. My colleague Ramesh Chandra has more.
Kaksar village at the India-Pakistan border has a special connection with the 1999 Kargil war. 35 kilometers from Kargil in the western Ladakh, Kaksar is one of the first villages that was severely affected even before the war. Leaving their homes, crops and rearing animals behind, the villagers vacated Kaksar in 1993 due to continuous violation of ceasefire in the region. This disturbed the life and culture of the tribes residing there, predominantly Shina tribe.
1999 के बहुत सारे होते चलते फौजी सारे आते गए फिर तो हमारे बहुत जवान हमारे जो गांव के जवान थे सारे कम से कम 45 लोग यहीं बैठे बाल बच्चे हमने निकाल दिए बूढ़े बुजुर्ग निकाल दिए 45 जवान यहाँ रहा आर्मी के साथ देते हम बैठे रहे जनाब। तो उसके बाद तो करगिल वार में तो इतने गोले चलते सर बिफोर चलाता था अपना तारा की तरह ऊपर घूमते घूमते आता था तो वो दुश्मन की चोटी में लगा था। फिर दुश्मन ज्यादा तौर हमारे गांव को टारगेट करता था। हमारा मस्जिद थी वहाँ पे मस्जिद को भी तोड़ दिया स्कूल तोड़ दिया फिर हमारी कुछ कैजुअल्टी हो गई गांव के सिविलियन क्या बहुत सारा कैजुअल्टी हो गया। पोस्ट में भी जाते थे हम पोस्ट में जाते थे सामान लेके खच्चर लेके अमृशन लेके हम जाते थे आगे हमारे जवान तो आगे बैठते थे जो मदद ले जाना राशन पानी है फेर का सामान है गांव वाले ले जाते थे।
The village stood by the Indian Army in the Kargil war. Even after 21 years of Kargil war, villagers remember each and every personnel of the Indian Army who sacrificed their life to save the villagers. One such name is Captain Saurav Kalia, who is remembered by the older generation and admired by the younger generation.
In 2003, we came back after a long battle. It was quite hard for the people, those belongs to the village of Kaksar. Everything was almost finished. All the sites you can see, all the heritage area you can see, but only few places you can find there was not bombing. Otherwise, in quite a few areas, it was destroyed by the enemy bomb shells and all that. And people also did a lot for our army as well, because the youths of Kaksar, even the elderly people also support.
The legacy of 1999 Kargil war and the war heroes lives on and continues to inspire.
This is Kaksar village, which is remembering for the last 20 years or even more the Kargil war heroes who have saved them in the borders here. And there are many stories about army people and many stories from the people of Kaksar who have supported army hand in glove throughout the Operation Vijay. With Ghulam Mehdi, Ramesh Chandra for DD News from Kaksar.
And that's a wrap on News Night. But news continues here on DD India and DD News. You can catch all the latest updates on our social media, mobile and digital platforms. We leave with a tribute to Kargil heroes on the eve of Victory Day. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.
आओ नमन करें उनको जिनके हिस्से ये मुकाम आया। खुशनसीब है वो वीर जो देश के काम आया। कारगिल के वीरों को शत शत नमन।
भारत हमको जान से प्यारा है, सबसे न्यारा गुलिस्तां हमारा है।